There are those who dream of a better world. Those who strive to climb higher, swim deeper, and venture further than the rest. We call them DaVincis. We marvel at their genius and are awed by their unbreakable spirit. Here they come. Stand back and watch as they inspire the human race by living a DaVinci life.
Hi guys, Rusty Johnson for DaVinci Life. Thanks for stopping by. Ask yourself this question. How much do you care about the planet and the creatures that live on it? Today's guest, Dr. Niall McCann, seems to have no ceiling to his passion for protecting endangered species and our natural resources. You've seen him on TV, The Biggest and the Baddest. He's a star of that. Also Lost in the Amazon. He's a biologist, a zoologist, a conservationist, and much more. This wildlife adventurer protects some of the world's most endangered species, and he does it with the heart of a humanitarian. This DaVinci does more to change the world before breakfast than most of us do in an entire lifetime. Dr. Niall McCann.
Rusty.
Hey, Niall McCann. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good.
Nice to see you.
How's your afternoon been so far?
Well, my daughter has just been sent home from nursery for yet another COVID test.
Oh, no.
This will be her 10th test. And I think the 8th time she's been sent home as a result of it. She's had to have 2 a couple of times. So yeah, poor little thing. She doesn't yet know because she's only 2.
Okay, only 2? Oh my gosh.
She'll find out when someone's looming over her trying to prod something up her nose again.
Exactly. It doesn't sound new to her though.
No, she's a proper expert these days. Poor little thing.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is amazing what's going on here.
Yeah. Are you East Coast or where are you?
Yeah, I'm in New York.
You guys have taken the brunt.
We're getting hit. And even right now, it's, I'd say for almost past 8 months or so, I've been really staying home, me and my wife doing the bare minimum, going out to get some food and stuff and coming right back. The problem is my wife's from the Amazon rainforest, so I barely speak English anymore. So like right now is the first time I've spoken English probably in the last 3 weeks.
Portuguese, Spanish, or
Spanish?
Spanish.
It's weird because she lives on the border of Brazil and Peru. So you have Spanish, but there's a dialect of Portuguese in there.
Portuñol.
Yes, exactly. Aside from studying endangered species extensively, when you were 18, you cycled through the Himalayas, right? And then when you were 26, you rode across the Atlantic. Now, I want to specify road, not meaning sitting in a boat rowed. I mean with oars, rowed from the Canary Islands to Antigua, right? And then to top it off, you skied across Greenland.
That's also true.
That's DaVinci badass, man. It's amazing what you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, those activities and adventures have formed a very interesting backdrop to my career as a biologist, which I've been kind of pursuing in parallel. I've had these multiple kind of career strands that I've tried to interweave as much as possible. I think one thing that people forget is that you can have unbelievable adventures in a rainforest or in a wetland somewhere. When people think about exploration and adventure, they're thinking mountains, they're thinking ice caps, and they're thinking oceans. But for me, I've had just as many unbelievable adventurous experiences staring down wildlife in remote places, remote jungles and stuff. And yeah, I've loved that ability to intertwine these multiple strands of my career.
I totally relate because early in my career, I started working with wildlife, worked with all different types, but specialized in birds of prey and reptiles. Then I went to Africa. And at first I went to Africa to study wildlife, but then I got really into seeing the culture and going into the shanty villages and seeing them. And that brought an entire new facet to what I was doing. Then when I got into the Amazon, that just totally changed my life. Once my boots hit the ground, that was it. So I've been going there about every 6 months for the past 15 years or so. To me, that's the adventure, because not only are you seeing the wildlife, but man, what a harsh climate it is.
Tough for people to survive in those kinds of environments. I remember speaking to a friend of mine that's done an amazing amount of work in the Amazon, mainly in Brazil, but all over Amazonia. And he was talking to someone up in the Xingu River area. And this is Amerindian guy who's lived in Jingu his entire life. And my friend Todd, he's a Canuck, born in Canada, so grown up surrounded by ice, a lot of time up in the Arctic. Now here he is in the Amazon, getting smashed by mosquitoes, hammered by mosquitoes. Yeah. And he turned to this Xingu shaman and said, "How do you get used to the mosquitoes?" And the guy just turned back and said, "Never get used to them."
No,
they're living in a harsh environment.
You don't. And so many times I would offer them repellent, and I've never had one native accept it. And sometimes we'd be talking at night, and while they're talking, it's just common. It's almost like a dance. They're just talking and slapping and doing, and so I said, "Here, you want some repellent?" And they're like, "Oh, no." And to me, it's like, why? But then if you think about it, say, okay, well, I'm either dealing with just these animals that are in my natural environment, or I'm going to wipe poison all over my body. They much rather just slap at them. I'd take a cardboard box and fill it up with baby chickens, and I'd sit it under my table at night, and I'd stick my feet in the box, and they would jump and eat all the mosquitoes off of my legs. At least from the knees down, I knew I wasn't going to get any mosquitoes, and they just get their bellies full and end up sleeping on my feet. You find any way you can.
That's a very novel idea. So I travel with my wife, who is very tasty to mosquitoes. So if I'm with her, they all flock to her instead.
Yeah, my wife's from the Amazon, so she's old school. They come right for the fresh meat here, the New York meat. So they hit me hard. You finished college pretty young, about 18 years old?
No, so it's just because in the UK we call college something different. So
okay.
College is the last 2 years of high school. So what we call college, I finished at 18, and then went away for a year and started volunteering as a biologist. And first time I went to Southern Africa and kind of experienced that megafauna, which was quite something.
Right. And
then came back to university and did a 3-year degree in zoology.
Your first real expedition was with your father, right? Cycling over for the Himalayas. I mean, what's that got to be like? Obviously, a lot of uphill.
Yes, a very lot of uphill, followed by a lot of downhill on the other side.
I bet that was refreshing. Yeah?
Unbelievable. Yeah. So the very last day of cycling, I was really unwell. My stomach was terrible. I'd eaten something awful, and I was very unwell. And we had 50 miles to go, so a long old distance to cycle, and we covered it in only a few hours because the entire thing was downhill.
Right.
I was basically asleep, holding onto my handlebars, just pummeling downhill, which was brilliant. The whole thing was a wonderful experience. At that age, most people's experience of life is pretty parochial, just kind of near to home, or cultures that are relatively like yours.
Right.
So to go from that and then spend a month in Kyrgyzstan, China, and northern Pakistan, and seeing these parts of the world, interacting with local people, because when you're cycling, you're able to interact with people the entire time. You're out in the open, and you move slowly enough. A lot of interactions. We were either camping or just thumbing someone down at the end of the day and asking if we could sleep in their yurt or whatever they had.
That's great. That's the way to travel.
It was wonderful. Some incredible experiences. A night of music. The guy lived in it was an old railway carriage, and right near the border between Kyrgyzstan and China. And him, his wife, their 3 children, and her brother and sister all lived in this tiny railway carriage. And they took us in for the night and fed us, and we had a night of music and singing and dancing. And then you all sleep spooning each other to stay warm because it's -10 outside. It's just incredible experiences.
I got so intrigued with you, rowing across the Atlantic. It just seems such an impossible feat. But aside from that, my question is, did it play on your mind at all? Well, I'm sure when you first get there, you get going, you get gung-ho, and then after a while, you're like, oh shit, I'm in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and there's no land to be found. Now, it was 66 days total?
63.
How long was that where you just never saw land? And did that play on your mind?
Yeah, so 63 days of rowing, and we didn't see land for 62 of those.
Wow. You didn't bring a soccer ball you could put a handprint on and talk to?
Well, I had my buddy. It was me and one other guy. And he was about as communicative as a soccer ball with a handprint on for a lot of it. But yeah, he suffered emotionally really badly. To begin with, in particular, just saying goodbye to land for the last time and not knowing when you're going to see it again. He really struggled with that. And then your body's just so tired. Because the shifts we were doing was I would row for 1 hour while James rested, and then he would row for an hour while I rested, and we kept that going 24 hours a day for the entire time. And so the most sleep you're getting at any one point is 48 minutes of sleep. So you're very tired. Physically, it's tough because the boat weighs a ton, metric ton. So just shifting a ton's worth of boat through the water, demanding physically, it takes its toll on you. But then there are moments of utter serenity. Right? So at night, when it's just you and the stars, and you see a meteor come into the atmosphere and separate into those constituent parts, and you're hearing the meteor crackling as it comes through the atmosphere. Wow, that type of thing is pretty special. Sure. Seeing dolphins illuminated by phosphorescence, that's pretty special. There's lots of really wonderful moments in an otherwise kind of torturous couple of months.
Right. Did you run into any storms?
Yeah. When you're out there for that long, it's almost inevitable that you're going to get smashed at some point, and we got properly hammered. It's really quite disconcerting when you've got waves that are so big that they're breaking over the top of you, and you're trying to keep the stern of your boat onto the wave so you can surf it, as opposed to turning sideways on and rolling. And really, really worrying. We rolled once over. James was rowing at the time. I was in the cabin, and that's very, very worrying. So we tipped to over 90 degrees, and then came back round. The whole deck was just full of water. James covered in water, obviously smashed and all. And that night, that was the worst night we had. We got hammered, just pummeled by waves that night. Really, really quite worrying. 1,500 miles from land in a storm.
Now, what's the first thing you did when you got to Antigua? Go to Shirley Heights?
Photographic evidence would suggest the first thing we did was to crack open a beer and take
I was going to say, Shirley Heights is the best place for that. Right at the yacht club there.
We ended up at Shirley Heights. So we were staying in English Harbour. It's a beautiful little place in English Harbour. It was amazing when you come into the harbour walls, which is only 400 meters wide or whatever it is, and that's the target you're aiming for. You've been going for 3,000 miles and you're aiming for a target that's 400 meters wide to get into the harbour, which is crazy. We rowed in, and I could see my brother was running along the harbour walls, and all the boats in the harbour were banging their klaxons and horns and stuff. It's pretty amazing. And you immediately get handed a bottle of champagne and a couple of beers, and start with that. And God, did we eat well. We ate very well for the next.
I can imagine just the feeling of accomplishment for that.
It's a strange feeling. I've never felt anything like it. Just your whole body fizzing with emotion and adrenaline. It's the first time in 2 months that we'd known for sure that we were going to be safe. And so suddenly that's a massive release. And then, in terms of accomplishment, that was 18 months of planning and preparation and fundraising and then getting fit and then doing it all. So for all of that to come to a head, essentially in one concentrated moment, it's quite a feeling.
What was the training regimen leading up to that, just to make sure you were physically ready for it?
We trained like maniacs. So we trained hard. 5 days a week in the gym. 2 of those days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, would be in morning and evening. And so that was a whole combination of circuit training with weights and rowing on an indoor rowing machine. And then on the weekends, we would row in our boats, on average, probably 3 weekends out of 5. So most weekends, but not quite all. And that would be 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, 8 hours a day, rowing like that. So we train like maniacs. And the training reached its zenith a couple of months before we actually left, when we broke the world record for rowing in 1 million meters on an indoor rowing machine. So between us, we would alternate, him for half an hour, me for half an hour during the daytime, and then at night it would be an hour each. And that was 67 hours, 24 minutes and 14 seconds, which is the new world record that we set.
That Greenland, that's, I'd say, more harsh between the weather and skiing, and I mean that's physically daunting. And how long did that take?
24 days, or fractionally under 23 days and 18 hours. That's a daunting environment. The polar environment is unforgiving, and again, there was that feeling of it's not land you're seeing for the last time; it's water you're seeing for the last time.
Right. Yeah.
Kiss goodbye to the coast, and then 24 days later, we hit the coast again on the other side, hauling all our gear with us. So to begin with, our sleds weighed 84 kilograms each. So it was me and a friend, just two of us. So carrying 84 kilos to begin with, or dragging that behind you. And Greenland starts steeply, and then it flattens off, and then steep at the other side again. So the first few days, you really feel like you're pulling uphill. And then it gets flat, but because you're high up, it gets seriously cold. So we know in Celsius, it got below minus 25 inside our tent at night for multiple hours at a time. So goodness knows how cold it was actually outside. In Fahrenheit, what's that? That's kind of minus 15, minus 20. So chilly. You notice that kind of cold. You grow frost in your beard.
What type of wildlife did you encounter?
Greenland, very little. Very little. So on the coasts, we were seeing polar bear footprints, and you see Arctic foxes and those types of things. In the center, we came across a couple of birds that have been blown off course. So wheatear, little migratory birds that come from North America into Europe every year. They've been blown off course. And then when you get to the west coast, there are things like muskox again, but they're right on the coast. On the ice cap, nothing can really survive there. Polar bears will walk into the ice cap a little bit, but we were fortunate not to encounter any in there. Like, polar bears are a wonderful thing to see, but you need to see them under the right circumstances.
Yeah, not with 85 kilos on your ass either.
30 of which was food, which they would be very attracted to.
Oh man! Now your entire family really is a biologist, correct? Your parents, your brother Rory and Finn, all biologists.
Yeah.
Did you ever think of going in a different direction at any time of your life, or your whole life you were going to be a biologist as well?
Never seriously thought of doing anything else. I had periods where I haven't been a purist, so worked in industry a couple of times, had times where, but whenever people would say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I say, "Oh, well, I'm a biologist. I'm just doing this just for the time being, and then I'll get back into being a proper biologist again." It was from a very young age. I knew that was going to be me. There wasn't really anything else I ever wanted to be. It was then just finding a niche within biology, because biology gives you lots of opportunities, from being a tour guide through to an academic professor and many things in between. And I think like most people's careers, what might look like a path is actually a very wibbly line. Oh yeah. Turning back with lots of time, and like some branches that failed and others that didn't work out for whatever reason, and somebody followed, and then so it's been much more of a career wibble than a career path.
And you started some really serious type of research at a rather young age. Did 2.5 years research in giant otters?
Well, I did research on giant otters, but not for that length of time. I suppose cumulatively over time it was. But it was when I was summer of my second year as an undergraduate. So at university, we went out to South America, spent 7 weeks studying giant otters. On the back of that, one of my friends who came with me got a PhD on them. So then he spent the next 4 years studying them, and I went out again. And we kept that going, for multiple years, which was fantastic. Wonderful animal, incredible species, hugely charismatic.
I see them in the Amazon, and actually I saw a beautiful family of them. And unfortunately, all I had was my cell phone, but it was still good enough. I got it. They were there, but I wish I had my better cameras with me. But it's definitely a type of animal that they're not boring to watch. At least they're always on the go.
And were they vocalizing with you as well?
They weren't. They were more trying to get away from me, I think. I pulled up in a canoe and they had their babies and everything. So they kind of left the water and went into the jungle, but they are very vocal, yeah.
We've had it a few times in different places, Bolivia and Guyana, where I've worked with them, where they're vocalizing at you because they're trying to aggressively push you off their territory. You're this new thing. They don't really know what you are. And we've been in places where they won't have encountered human beings before. So you're this very large, half-naked monkey, which is, for some reason, it's floating on the water in a canoe, and they want to get you off their land. So they vocalize loudly, and they charge at you, the bow weight coming off their chest as they're charging through the water. Amazing to witness.
Oh, that's great. And you also did work with tapirs, correct?
My PhD on the Central American tapir. The picture behind me is of a Central American tapir. So I spent 5 years in total doing a PhD. About a year of that was actually spent in the jungles, cloud forest mainly, in Honduras, studying the conservation of Baddest tapir in Honduras. Another incredible animal. I've actually never seen a live Baddest tapir, despite doing a PhD on them. I've seen tapirs in the Amazon, but that's a different species. But I've never seen the species that I've got a PhD on.
Black-backed jackals as well. Is that in Namibia?
Yeah, in Namibia. So straight after graduating from university, spent 3 months working on a black-backed jackal research project in an incredible place where the desert comes to the sea, the Skeleton Coast of Namibia. It's a wonderful country. Scenically, it's about as beautiful as anywhere gets in Africa. It's spectacular. And it's got some very interesting biodiversity. I'm now potentially going to work my way back into working in Namibia in the future if I'm lucky. I would hope to. It's such a spectacular place.
Jackals, they're little pissers, man. I love watching them. But I was in Kalahari Gensbach National Park, and I put my sandals outside my tent when I went to sleep, and woke up, and one was gone, and all I saw were tracks of a black-backed jackal and the little line of him dragging my sandal out into the desert, never to be found again. Yeah. So then actually I had to walk around 3 days with one sandal until I traded some stuff with a local who made a pair of shoes out of tire tread and like flip-flops out of old blown out tire tread.
You're quite lucky if that's all it did. The other thing they like to do, if they find something new in their environment, is that they'll go to the toilet on top of it. So you're actually quite lucky that they ran away as opposed to doing a poo on top of your sandal.
Yeah, no, I made out good there, man. I made out good. Yeah. So being a biologist, I mean, that really became a springboard for you to do many things, like you said. What else do you have planned in the future?
Yeah, so I've left what you would call frontline research and set up a conservation organization called National Park Rescue. And our remit is to try and identify national parks in Africa that cannot cope with the poaching crisis and try and help resuscitate them. So we've worked in Malawi. We're currently working in Zimbabwe. We've been working in this amazing national park called Chisarira National Park up near Lake Kariba, which has suffered terrible amounts of poaching over the last few decades. And in the 3 years that we've been there, we've completely turned it around. Elephant poaching is down by 90%. We've engaged the communities in what we're doing. We're the largest local employer. Lions are breeding again and doing really well. The lion population is on the up. So that's my big focus, is national park rescue, consolidating what we're doing in Zimbabwe and then expanding to other areas to take our successful model for conservation and expand it to other protected areas. And so that's my biggest focus. But then in terms of other kind of traditional adventures, I'd love to get up to Baffin Island in northern Canada and go climb some mountains there.
Nice. With the anti-poaching in Africa, is your process community-based of getting the community to really protect their wildlife? And you think that process works better as far as a military action, or you need both, or what's your opinion?
You need a combination of both, because you have to be a deterrent and you have to be an effective law enforcement force in case there are some really serious criminals in your area. So you have to have that military, for want of a better word, capacity. But you are going to fail unless you get the communities on side. You have to put communities first in every way. So for us, we've got 30 members of staff. 23 of those come from communities that literally border the national park. 7 come from communities that are a little further afield because they have specialist skills that we needed. We've incorporated the communities into every aspect of what we do. We buy all of our food for the park from those communities. We give them all the first employment opportunities. We consult them on everything. If you go to war with the communities, not only is it wrong morally, but you will fail. You will fail. Right. So you need to put communities at the heart of everything. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you are an effective law enforcement operation in the same breath.
The part of poaching where the outsider looking to make the money, and then you see the poacher that's trying to feed their family on the ground there. Have you been able to convert them instead of killing, they're protecting them?
I think you've touched on the most important thing, is that you have to enable people to make an income out of wildlife that isn't just killing it. And that's what we've been really trying to do is show people that actually you can make a living by protecting these things. So we offer jobs for people to protect. I still have a project ongoing in Honduras as well. And the first guide that we recruited was a poacher. that was his way of making money before. He made money poaching. That meant he knew that national park better than anybody else. So he was the best person to defend it.
They know the animals, they know the terrain. And if you could change the mindset, they're probably the most valuable asset.
Definitely. And you have to be careful in some instances, because some people choose poaching because they like criminal activity. And no matter what they do in life, it will be something criminal. It's just same here in South Wales, same in New York. Some people are irredeemable, but others, they're looking for an opportunity. They just want to feed their family, and we want to give them the opportunity to feed their family in a way that's also good for the environment. Yeah,
exactly. Paul O'Donoghue, he's working to bring lynx back into the UK. Mm-hmm. What effect has he had on you?
Paul was one of the people when I was 18, 19 years old, who confirmed to me that I was doing the right thing by wanting to be a biologist with my life. So Paul was a few years further down the line, as was everyone else that we were working with together in Mauritius, in the Indian Ocean. And Paul had finished his degree. He was starting to get into conservation, and we spent a lot of time together. And here was me. I hadn't started my degree yet. I still had to go to university and go through all this. And I knew that from my conversations with Paul and with these other people that we were working with, that being a biologist and going into conservation was the right thing to do with my life. And so he set me off on that path. Was one of the people that set me off on that path. He was also the person that gave me the idea of working with giant otters for the first time. And so that then was a major springboard into everything else. So without crediting him over and above many other people who have also had a massive influence, Paul was a very influential person for me at that time.
The Echo Parakeet. What's it like seeing an animal that there's only 7 of?
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy feeling. So Echo Parakeets got down to 7. Mauritius kestrel got down to 5, 1 breeding female, and pink pigeons got down to under 30. Well, these are all species living in Mauritius. When you're lucky enough to hold those animals, because I was lucky enough to hold all of them, putting rings on them as part of your studies, you really do feel as though you're holding on to something truly precious, but also something that's an icon. So for me, at that young age, working with people like Paul and Carl Jones, who was our boss, and then various other people that I worked with, that was really inspirational. But so was working with species like that, species that have kind of kissed extinction and then come back from it. And that was hugely inspirational for me as well, realizing that we can bring things back from the edge if you put enough time and effort.
In the Mauritius kestrel, what's the population now?
Around 1,000. So they're doing pretty well. Echo Parakeets, 300. Yeah, both doing really well, which is quite extraordinary. So there's obviously issues with genetic viability in the long term, but they've done unbelievably well, thanks to Carl Jones and his team of dedicated scientists for the Mauritius Wildlife Foundation.
Now for another crazy thing that you've done, like Percy Fawcett, you look for the lost city of Zed. What was that like, man? I mean, and I'm an Amazon guy, and so I know what you went up against.
Yeah, the DVD is just there, lost in the Amazon on my bookshelf there. So what we were really doing was looking for Fawcett. And because he was looking for the lost city of Zed, which might not exist. So he was looking for something which probably was a figment of his imagination. He existed. Yeah. He existed. So we went looking for him. And that was amazing. One of the things that was interesting about it is because there's so much conspiracy around the story of Fawcett. When I entered that world, I kind of unwittingly entered that bubble of conspiracy. So I've had people writing to me since making that program who believe that they're still talking to Fawcett today through psychic means.
Really?
Yeah, I've had all these interesting correspondence with it.
That's amazing.
Which is nuts. But being on the ground, actually feeling as though you're finding evidence, getting one step closer, it was proper thrill of the chase. It was an amazing experience. We met some great folk doing it, and it was a real privilege.
How long was that expedition?
We were in Brazil on the ground for 3 weeks, driving around the Mato Grosso, following one lead to the next. It was quite something. And we spent time with the Bakari Indians, where Fawcett had launched his final expedition from, spent time in that village, saw the little house that he'd stayed in, which is derelict now. And then, off we went to try and follow him to find these Kamukwakwa falls, these waterfalls that he'd been talking about. It was a truly wonderful trip. But it also, as I mentioned, such an interesting insight into that kind of that alternative world where people bridge science and mysticism. Because his life was a mix of science and mysticism. And the people that follow him to this day still bridge that device. It's a kind of cryptozoological world. It was very interesting being a part of for a while.
Now, is that a closed chapter for you now, or do you ever think of going back and trying again? Or?
I'd never say never. I'd never say never. If some compelling evidence were to come to light about his last movements, I'd be very interested to follow that up. I met his granddaughter, who lives here in South Wales, and holding the signet ring that he was wearing when he went out on that last expedition, which subsequently got traded through and was found in a pawn shop somewhere in Brazil. So holding that was quite powerful. And there's more to that story that to still be discovered. He was probably ambushed and mugged and buried somewhere in the Pantanal, which would be a terrible, sad end. But wouldn't it be wonderful if people found a body or found something else? It'd be truly exciting. I'd love to be a part of that.
Yeah. Now in Nepal, I saw this incredible video of you and that tiger. What was that like? I mean, to be out in the jungle like that, come across the wild man-eater. She was definitely pissed. Surprised you were there. And I've seen, I know you're an elephant back, but I've seen tigers jump right up and swat people right off the elephants. So, what was that experience like to you?
That was a life-affirming experience. When you're looking into the eyes of a tiger while it bears down upon you at 40 miles an hour, that's a humbling experience. Yeah. And for me, it's the sound more than anything. The sight of it is something else. But when a tiger roars, everything shakes. And you feel it in your bones. You feel it in your water. So that was quite something. Just your body vibrating as it came towards us, and I still seared into my mind is as she turned off, spun off to the side, and disappeared again into the bush, 4 meters in front of us, so close. It was quite something.
I was mauled a little bit by a tiger, but it was a little bit of a different experience. It was at producer Ron Howard's house.
Right.
Apollo 13. He had this beautiful polo field in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I was doing a benefit for the Endangered Wildlife Trust out of Johannesburg, and I was raising money for cryogenic freezers for helicopters, so they could go in and freeze gametes of dead rhinos and things like that. And I was working with Jim Fowler from Wild Kingdom at the time, and we brought in a Siberian tiger, a young one, probably about 300 pounds maybe. And I was there holding it. And I had her by the leash, which is the funniest damn thing in the world, of me holding a 300-pound tiger by the leash, which what the hell is that going to do? But so she's sitting there and I could see the tail. She's getting a little squirrely. And I made the worst mistake that I already knew you shouldn't do, but I was daydreaming, is while we were talking, I was looking, he was facing the audience, and I was staring at the two white spots in the back of the ears. And in the midst of it doing that, he turned around and locked on eyes with me. And then we had this staring at contest. And I was like, oh shit. And this is like, I mean, they had a car show. There was a 1936 Delahaye Roadster there that, $2 million cars. I mean, these were like the finest of the finest people. And now this tiger is locked onto me in front of them all. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to win this. So I figured I'd turn away and just see what happened. So I kind of turned away, and it stood up, put its chest up, walked over, puffed me right in the junk, and then just kind of walked up on me, swat, grabbed me right by the top of the head and did a good bite. And actually my ear hole and in the corner of my eye. And luckily I was able to get my hand under it and then pull out from under and use his weight to drop him down. And then I just locked my arm on his collar. So when he would turn for me, I just bounce off until I could calm him down and get him in the cage. Now, with that said, of course, he was just playing with me, because if he was serious, they could have mailed me home in an envelope afterwards. But oh my God, the adrenaline rush of that is unparalleled. Yeah, the sad part of that story too was that with tigers in captivity, is this came from a zoo and was brought in, and because of being in captivity, you know, they get a little nutty sometimes. And this one through the year got so aggressive that it went from zoo to zoo. And of course, then the poor thing never had any connection with a staple person in its life. And I remember several years after, I was coming home from a gala, and I sit down, I turn on National Geographic, and it's that tiger. The tiger's name was Raja. Remember, they explained the story of how aggressive it got and how it was terrible to keep these cats in captivity, and they euthanized it right on camera. And even though it attacked me, man, I felt horrible for that poor thing and the life that it had.
I find it staggering. There's more tigers captive in the US than there are wild.
In the wild, yeah.
Which is pretty mad.
The truth of that, I live here in upstate New York, and I remember going to a party way up when I was, in my early 20s, and this guy in the backyard just had maybe I'd say like a 5-meter octagon cage with a full-grown tiger in it, just walking around in circles. And the laws have since changed, but there was a time when you were not allowed to have a raccoon, but you could have a lion or a tiger. So at least they're stiffening up the laws now. But yeah, it's a shame that you see there's more in captivity in the U.S. than there is in the wild.
Yeah, it's a tragedy.
Out of all the renowned biologists and anthropologists and conservationists, which ones have inspired you the most?
You can't look far beyond Sir David Attenborough, really. He's had an unbelievable impact on so many people for multiple generations, because he's now 94 years old, 93, 94, and he's been making television since his 20s. And he's been making the best television in the world for several decades. So he's had a huge influence. And then otherwise, I've been really lucky to interact with some very inspirational biologists along the way, people that I'm now in touch with quite a lot. So someone like Will Travers, who runs Born Free Foundation, and Ian Redmond, people like that I knew growing up as being these icons of conservation. I've now got them on WhatsApp. And that's the really nice thing. It's cool. And I think my parents have found that quite interesting as well, because a lot of their friends have stayed in academia or biology and have become very eminent. And suddenly here I am as their son started to interact on a similar level to a lot of these people, which is quite funny. So finding myself on webinars with types of people that I grew up hearing my parents talking about. It's just been a nice evolution.
Growing up watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. That was every Sunday. It was back to back with Walt Disney. Then in my teens, I bred European eagle owls and got a call from Jim Fowler to come down and bring one of the babies to the Today Show. And we became friends after that, worked together for many years, and he was a huge influence on my life. Unfortunately, he just recently passed. But when you can work with an idol or someone you hugely respect, that's the name of the game. Then.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and realizing that they're just people as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Had dinner with David Attenborough, and he's just cracking jokes at the dinner table, and this is brilliant. He's a really funny man, but you wouldn't necessarily know that from watching him on the BBC.
What did you think of his Planet Earth series?
It's extraordinary, but it was one of many unbelievable flagships along the way. It's quite interesting though, because he no longer writes the shows himself. He contributes his narration and his presenting, and I've noticed there's been quite a big shift since he stopped writing away from like the amazing information, and it's now amazing imagery. So I think as he's kind of stepped back from that really upfront role of writing everything, we've lost a bit of the educational value of these shows.
Mhm.
What we've gained is phenomenal imagery. And each new series takes another step in terms of photographic beauty and image creation, etc. But we're not still having that same degree in a series of shows. Whereas Trials of Life, Life on Earth, that's a degree course across 13 episodes.
I 100% agree. Now, with global warming, a lot of people, when they speak about it, they refer the melting ice sheets to water levels. But in your experience, have you seen evidence of global warming within the wildlife community?
Yeah. So you see it everywhere you look. Like with everything, you just have to start paying attention. The big things you notice within wildlife are things like the seasons happening at different times. So spring coming earlier, autumn as well coming a little bit earlier. And what does that mean for if you've got all the plants coming up early, but then the insects are out of sync with them and the birds are out of sync with them? That creates massive change. A big thing that some people don't realize is happening is that lots of species are constrained by temperatures that they're able to live in. So they can only survive within certain temperature bounds. And if an area is heating up, then they have to end up going further and further up a hillside or a mountain to still live within that temperature bound. Hillsides and mountains then run out. So some species are literally being forced out of existence because there's nowhere left to go up the hill. Yeah. Which is quite interesting seeing that happening. So we see the effects of global warming all the time. And I think it's quite important to talk about it in warming terms. Because climate change can be seen as a bit of an ambiguous term. What we're talking about it's not just change. It is a drastic warming of the planet in a way that is unsustainable for all life on Earth.
What do you say to people who become complacent of these types of problems because they think that it's just too big to manage?
Yeah, really important point, I think, is it's not too big to manage. This is a massive thing. It's global, but it means that everyone is a stakeholder in that, and we can all make a difference. We can all do stuff, just little things that make our lives better and improve the planet. Start by eating a little bit less red meat. You will be more healthy as a result, and you'll have a knock-on positive impact on carbon emissions. Cycle to the shops as opposed to driving to the shops. You will get fitter, you will enjoy the outdoors, and you will reduce your emissions. All these little things, there's so many others that you can do that have a net positive impact on you and a net positive impact on the planet. And I think massively on yourself. And what I think people feel that to live a sustainable way might be some kind of sacrifice. But on the contrary, actually, you can usually improve your life and your own health by also living in a more sustainable way.
Now, when you're filming or even doing your research, and from someone who loves animals, when you see a life and death struggle with an animal that you're researching or filming, have you ever had the desire to go in and intervene? Is that just taboo?
No, well, some people would say it's taboo, but you wouldn't be alive if you didn't feel sorry for a baby seal having its eyes pecked out by seagulls and wanting to intervene. So I intervened in Namibia a couple of times when baby sea lions were being attacked, and the intervention was really to euthanize them because their life was absolutely awful at that stage. They'd lost their eyes. They'd already lost their eyes, and they were living in an intolerable state. It's so hard not to. Like when you see little baby turtles being picked off by vultures and all this type of stuff, it just need to get to see. You shouldn't intervene, but there's times when I wouldn't be human if I didn't feel some real attachment to the underdog there and want to try and help them out.
Being that this is a potentially dangerous field, I'm thinking, of course, of Steve Irwin and that tragedy. Do you ever fear for your life or have had close calls?
I've had a couple of really close calls, I suppose. The most nervous I've ever been was as a result of an elephant charge. Elephants are unbelievably strong. They're hugely strong. They're hugely intelligent, and if they get pissed off at you, then you are the object of their ire, and they will make sure that they beat you down. And the most nervous I've ever been was in a situation with an elephant in Nepal, and I was very lucky that it never quite figured out where I was. It could smell me. could hear me, but it couldn't quite see me. And I got very lucky that was the case. That's been worrying. Then just otherwise, inevitably, I've come across and handled a lot of venomous snakes over the years. And those types of things are slightly dodgy situations, but with practice, you feel like you're on top of it. Yeah. And you manage the risks. So very rarely handle things these days. When I was younger, I used to handle things a lot more, but you manage the risks that you're in. It's when things are outside of your control that it becomes more nerve-wracking. So that situation with the elephant in the pool was outside of my control. I had a lion wake up from anesthetic right next to me 45 seconds after we gave it the reversal agent. That was out of my control. So there's been a couple of situations like that where suddenly I've realized that things are hanging in the balance, and it's just the winds of chance that are going to let me get through this.
And I've seen that too. And I've taken some, but some would feel be unnecessary risks with venomous snakes as well. For me, it's a little bit different. I realized later what attracted me dealing with potentially dangerous wildlife is that, when you're either catching a cobra, picking up a bushmaster, or pulling a bald eagle out of a net to bandit, that type of intense situation is what I needed to focus and be in the now. And for me, it really almost became an addiction, because something that dramatic really had to happen for me to get my 100% attention and focus on it. And I like that feeling, but unfortunately, I have to put myself in those types of situations to get it.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at it like a fix, kind of a drug that you're needing. And nothing quite concentrates the mind like a viper or a cobra. That concentrates the mind. It really does. When you're I've handled a big Russell's viper. And you look very closely. You're feeling every movement, and trying to be very careful. You get
that hypersensitive mode. I recently was when I was last in the jungle, I wanted to catch a bushmaster, and I had to go way deep in. Matter of fact, this guy was wild. He was Sacha. This guy was born and raised in the jungle, and he actually would provide jungle meat to the local marketplace. And he just knew the terrain so much. So I grabbed a rice bag, and we went into the jungle. But he said, the deal is, if we catch something, you're going to take it with you. Because I had one kill my dog. He had two dogs. One was killed by a jaguar, and the other one was killed by a bushmaster. And he goes, and if you get one, if you don't take it, I'm going to kill it. And so I said, oh, no problem, I'll take it. And so, I was being safe. I had my snake sticks and everything, and we go trudging through, and it's in the middle of the night, so it's about 1 o'clock in the morning or so, and come up on this bushmaster. It's 9 feet long.
Yeah, amazing.
It is not going to fit inside this goddamn rice bag, and nor am I going to carry it in a rice bag for the next 4 hours to get out of here. So, and I was like, I'm not touching this thing. But then I'm like, I just brought these guys into the jungle. This is what I'm going to do. They presented me with exactly what I wanted. I can't bitch out now, so caught it. But the snake sticks didn't do anything. A 9-foot viper with a 3-foot snake stick. I was able to cut down a sapling and use that and milk it and get some of the venom, and was able to get it on its way before the guy took a shot at it. Unfortunately, but he wouldn't even come that close to it. He was terrified of it, so he had a shotgun with him. But unfortunately, I did it a second time and let him go, and it came back for me. It was just cornered, and it came back and lunged for me, and I had my machete out, just trying to keep some distance, and then over my shoulder, bam! He gut shot it, and I felt like shit too. I'm like, I didn't want to do that. And we ended up, we took it home and we ate her. So at least she was put to at least some good use.
Wasn't wasted. I felt that a few times when because of me, we've opened up a path to an area that didn't have a path before. So I spent 2.5 days cutting a trail, and I do some surveys, some research, come back out. But now there's a path that poachers can use to get into somewhere that wasn't there before. And I've definitely felt the weight of that likewise, in your situation, that animal wouldn't be dead if you hadn't asked them to come and do that.
Exactly.
And that's, you bear that as a burden. And I can understand why people that live with these animals are terrified of them, because the reality of living next to bushmasters is that your dogs will get killed every now and then.
Yeah. My best friend down there, Jose, and I said, listen, I want to go out and get a bushmaster. And he's one of the best guides I've ever seen. Well, he says, well, good luck. Hell no, I'm not going with you. I'm like, oh, come on, man, don't be like that. You'll wuss. And then he said, well, no. He said, one day, he says, my uncle went out to hunt for bushmeat. He didn't come back. That can happen. Sometimes they get disoriented if they can't see the sun. So they usually just curl up next to a tree, sleep it off, and then in the morning they find their way home. The next morning he doesn't come back. So they send out, the family goes out and looks for him. And not only did he have a machete and had a shotgun, the bushmaster bit him 3 times and was curled up on his chest while he laid there dead.
Wow.
And he was about 12 years old when he saw this. And he's like, there's no way in hell you're getting me near this thing.
Yeah, that would stay with you.
Yeah.
One of my biggest disappointments, it was not seeing a bushmaster. So we went to make a program about them, a TV program, to try and film them in Venezuela. And we spent 3 weeks out in the field, and we didn't see one at all. So we had to change the topic of the TV program.
Right.
And we were able to do that, but still that lingers with me, that's one of the most remarkable animals in the world. And I'd love to see one in the wild.
I've seen about 3 or 4 and caught 2 of them. But man, what an incredible creature. But you know what frightens me more is the fer-de-lance.
Yeah, fer-de-lance is a maniac.
They are nuts, and they're small enough to where you're on top of them. And my part of the Amazon is, I don't know anybody who has a family member who has not been bit by a fer-de-lance, because they feed on amphibians, so they're right along the water's edge. They're around. They eat so small rodents, so they're close to villages. And a lot of it is women getting bit while they're washing clothes down by the river, or when they go to the bathroom at night, because a man can just pee off the end of the hut, but a woman, no, she goes to an outhouse, and the little walkways that are collecting the heat during the day, they gather on there and they step on them. And they are just little maniacs, man.
Yeah, they're worth respecting. that's for sure. And snakebite is one of those underappreciated public health crises. I was working in India 2 years ago. There's over 50,000 deaths per year from snakebite in India. That's
is that from Indian cobra or
4 species mainly? So Indian cobra being one of them, but there's actually a few species within that, so monocled, spectacled, etc. There's the common crate, and again a few species within the crates. Russell's viper and saw-scaled viper.
They're horrible.
So,
they kind of like turn your blood into jello.
Yeah, they have a really pretty unpleasant effect on anything they bite. But 50,000 people a year, that's India's got a lot of people, but it's population-wise, that would be 10,000 people a year in the US. So if 10,000 people a year were dying from snakebite in the US, the country would consider that a public health crisis.
Oh, we exterminate them.
Yeah, which would be a terrible response. Just finding a way to try to coexist.
That's what we would do, unfortunately.
Yeah,
it'd be a horrible response, but that is the way that it would be handled. Unfortunately, I'm from here. Yeah. I know how they act.
yeah, too true.
Protecting animals in parts of the world where Westerners aren't welcome. How do you solve that?
Yeah, I think try and make yourself welcome by being nice. So as opposed to telling people what you're wanting to do, ask them what they want out of stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's a big difference. No one wants to live in a place with terrible air, dirty water, floods, and all these other issues. They want to live in places that have functioning landscapes that deliver ecosystem services. And asking people what they want out of their environment, I think, is the most important thing. So. Got to be really careful not to seem or be neo-colonial about stuff when you're going to a new place. Bringing your ideas, your Western ideas into a place. Just go and find out what matters to the people, and then design a conservation project around that.
In your travels, have you found people or wild animals to be more dangerous?
Yeah, always people.
Yeah. I got asked that all the time.
Yeah, always people. I know I can manage most wild animals. There's some situations which are slightly out of your control.
You know they want to kill you sometimes. They're not trying to be nice and then stab you in the back later. Have you had any experiences with people throughout your travels?
Very lucky. So no really close calls. Just a couple of kind of mildly threatening situations. Like places that I was working in Honduras, no one from the outside had ever been before. And they were quite suspicious of outsiders. So I was speaking to people in this tiny village, just a collection of a few houses. And I was going to be working up in the forest behind them the next day. And I just got chatting to them about snakes. I said, I love snakes. And let me know if you see any. And the next morning, as I was walking up the trail, they'd killed a viper and they'd hung it on a forked stick over the trail so I would see it. That was just kind of a mildly threatening thing to me. But given where I've worked, how remote I've been very lucky. I've had narco traficantes, so drugs runners come past in some parts of La Mosquitia. I've heard the airplanes going over, dropping the cocaine at night in the middle of the forest, that type of stuff, but never actually been personally threatened. And partially that's luck, and partially that's been really nice to just kind of turning up with a smile.
That's it. Even before I could speak the language in the Amazon, and actually as well as when I was in Africa, a smile, a handshake, and respect goes a long way. I one time in Zimbabwe, I went into I was in Vic Falls. I went into this bar, and I walk in, and there's got to be 300-400 people, wall to wall, packed to pack. I'm the only Westerner in there, so I sit at the bar and I grab a beer. Guy comes up next to me and wants to buy me a beer, which was unusual. So he does, and I said, I figured, I'm from New York, so this guy wants my wallet. He wants to play me. He wants to do, So I just said, it's the question. Out of everybody here, I said, why did you come up to me and buy me a beer? And he said, we've met before. And I'm like, when? He says, you were crossing the Zambezi River into Zambia. And he goes, I was selling Coca-Cola and you bought a Coca-Cola from me. I said, but I'm sure tons of people buy Coca-Cola from you. And what it is a glass bottle. So you have to drink it there and give back the bottle.
Give it back.
And I said, so why did you remember me? He says, you were the only one who was nice and talked to me.
Wow. What a difference that makes.
Yeah, it does. And just being humble and being open to their life does wonders. And you go in like a colonial, you learn your lesson real fast.
Yeah, it's the wrong thing to do, but going in, smiling, being friendly, and asking what people want, they really appreciate that.
Now, I got a kick out of this. Now, your brother Rory probably is the only person in the world who has read Harry Potter while riding a tortoise.
Yeah, I love that photo. I love that photograph.
My question is, what animal would you choose to ride, and what book would you read while riding it?
That's a great question. So, full disclosure, would not normally advocate riding wild animals.
Yeah.
That being said, there is a photograph of my dad lying naked on an elephant seal, which was taken in the mid-1980s when he was working down in South Georgia in Antarctica. And we love that photograph. When he died 7 years ago, and that was the photograph on the funeral book, and I've presented that photograph to literally tens of thousands of students and
I can imagine. That's got to be an epic photo, man.
It's an amazing photo. So I would love to ride an elephant seal, recreate the photograph that my dad did. And what could I be reading at the time? It would have to be something so comedic, like a Beano Mag or something like that, because the situation's so absurd that you'd have to take it to its logical extremity. So I don't know, Charlie Brown or a Beano while sat on an elephant seal.
Now, one thing that's questioned me that I've even noticed in the Amazon and has frustrated me there very much, and throughout the world, is why aren't there stricter laws preventing deforestation by major logging companies?
Sometimes it's not the fact that the laws aren't strict enough, although they're not. It's the implementation of those laws. So we have things like FSC, so Forest Stewardship Council, and all the timber you buy should be FSC certified. But people launder. They launder illegally chopped timber and put it through FSC and get it washed, and out it comes. And you think you're buying something that's sustainable, but it's not. It's been laundered in.
Like
so for me, it's exactly the same way. You're laundering in blood diamonds into the market, into the normal legal market. So we not only we need better regulation, and we need better enforcement of the regulation at the same time.
And governments that want to do it, because I was real happy years back when my area down in Peru, they ban it, and then next thing you know, China's coming in and wiping it out.
Yeah, and the Chinese offer a lot of money to these developing nations, and with that comes some major caveats. We will take all of your natural resources, all this, and it's a big issue. I think under the Biden administration, there's likely to be a lot more pressure coming from the US about forest protection. The current UK government is also quite positive when it comes to forest protection globally. The EU is starting to realize that this is a really important thing. COVID-19 has made us realize that we can't mess with nature too much more, because it will come back to bite you, as it has in this instance. And we're also realizing now that deforestation is one of the major causes of strife within human societies. We are desertifying areas, making them unlivable. Global warming is going to make many parts of the planet unlivable. That creates major migration pressure. We need to be protecting forests in order to survive as a species. And Western governments are just starting to figure that out. So they now need to offer some really serious incentives to developing nation governments to protect their forests.
Where's your favorite place on Earth?
Oh, really hard to say. Yosemite National Park is pretty hard to beat. If it was empty, it would be the best place on Earth, but it's not empty. It's full of people because it's so beautiful. Likewise, Zion is an unbelievable place. So places like that are something else. Over the last few years, I've been going back to Chisarira National Park in Zimbabwe, because that's where my project is with National Park Rescue, and that's a pretty wonderful part of the world. And now I've got such a part of me is there because we've been working on this operation to save it. So it's difficult to say where's my favorite. Like Guyana in North and South America is unbelievable because it's an untouched part of the Amazon. If I could only sit in one landscape for the rest of my life, it would have to be a landscape with topography, with mountains, and Yosemite's pretty hard to beat.
Sure. Now, speaking of mountains, you climb as well, right? What's the highest peak you've reached?
Oh, actually not that high. I would have reached a few that are over 4,000 meters, so kind of 13,000 feet. But I've never been anything higher. I've never mountaineered in the Himalayas or any of the ranges outside the Alps that have got really big peaks.
Any desire to do Everest?
Yeah, when I was younger, I thought I definitely would do it. Nowadays, I'm not so sure. It's a bit of a circus, but I'm interested in mountaineering still. I'd love to do more of it, mainly in the Alps here in Europe, because it's so accessible and there's so many amazing mountains. But I'd love to do some stuff in some of the ranges further away as well. You can have just wonderful experiences on the top of a mountain, and I hope to introduce my daughter to climbing and mountaineering in time, and I hope to share those experiences with her.
Now, I've always wondered, why don't the Sherpas get the credit like their counterparts do? And they're probably carrying half the crap anyway.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's been troubling the world of mountaineering for a long time. And suddenly this year, it got turned on its head when a team of Nepali Sherpas summited K2 in winter for the first time ever. It was the last mountain of the 8,000 meter peaks, of which there are 14, to have been summited in winter. And it was done by an all Nepali team. And that was quite something. So all of a sudden, the attention was back on them. All of the other 13 peaks over 8,000 meters have been summited by Westerners who had been guided there by the Sherpas, or supported by their Sherpas, if not guided. But suddenly they had one for themselves, and for 10 of them to summit at the same time, singing the Nepalese national anthem on the summit as they all stepped towards the highest point, that was quite something. That was a powerful moment.
Wow, yeah, that's beautiful. Question: have you ever discovered a new species, animal or plant?
I have been there when new species have been discovered, but I
Mhm.
haven't been the one that has actually done the taxonomy.
Uh-huh.
But in parts of Honduras, I've been there when new species of lots of insects, so quite a few species of insects have been discovered, and even a new species of reptile, an agama, an agamid lizard, so the lizards with the funny little throat pouches. I've been there when one of them was discovered. So that's a privilege being a part of that, but I wasn't the one that discovered it personally, just a contributing author.
I'll have to send you a photo. I have a photo of an insect that I sent all over to the top universities, and the most they can say is that it's related to an assassin bug, but none have given me a solid name for it. I'll forward it to you. Let me know what you think it is.
Yeah, look forward to seeing it.
Now, after having your daughter, how has that changed your life?
Yeah, just it focuses the mind a little bit. Having a child, and it's no longer all about you. It's very much about her. And the thing I'm most looking forward to is introducing her to a lot of the things that I'm lucky enough to do in my life. I go and I work in Zimbabwe and routinely see elephants and lions and these types of things, and I can't wait to first show her an elephant. That's going to be quite something. And all the little adventures that I like to have around here, climbing and cycling and those types of things, getting her into that, and for her to be a vehicle for me to have great experiences. I just can't wait for all that. She's 2 years old now, so she's just starting to experience and understand the birds and the animals around her. And I'm loving her enthusiasm. And yeah, that will only grow and grow.
That's fantastic. I know you're busy and you got daddy duty coming up this afternoon as well. So just one more question. Where is conservation needed most on this planet today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there are lots of answers to it. Conservation is needed wherever you are. So wherever you are listening, wherever you're listening from, conservation is needed on your patch, because we can't just conserve one place and ignore somewhere else. So wherever you're listening from, conservation is needed in your home patch, and we can all do it. We can all have an impact, be it small or great. Conservation is needed absolutely everywhere.
Well, Niall, thank you so much for visiting me. I know this audience is enjoying it so much. You're a badass, my friend. And
thanks, Rusty. It's great to
glad
talk to
meet you, and let's definitely keep in touch. And I'll send you that insect photo. I'll be interested to see what you think about it.
I look forward to seeing it. I'll get it across to some taxonomist friends of mine, see what get them to pass their academic eye over it.
Perfect. Niall, thank you so much. You have a good one.
Cheers, Rusty. See you again.
Care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
A DaVinci Life.